Oklahoma Sooner fans got rough news last week that Troy Everett was injured again. And in the VV presser, he kind of stated, hey, he's going to have to undergo surgery, and he's likely not to return until the end of fall camp, which means you probably don't see him until conference play. And that bears the question, what's now? What's next for Oklahoma on this offensive line and Bill Bedenbaugh? We're going to talk about it. We're going to dive into it. And today I'm joined by Coop over at Unfair Sports. Coop, how you doing today?
Doing good, brother. I like this weather. This is not bad weather.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking the dogs out for a walk today. So
Yeah, definitely.
did that yesterday. It was good. 2-mile walk. Do it again today. But we got to talk about this offensive line because I think for a lot of Oklahoma fans, this is scary. I think they have been given these great offensive lines for as long as Bill Bedenbaugh's been here, and they don't know what it's like to have to replace all your starters the way that we're having to. And you lose Troy Everett, who I think a lot of people were penciling in as the starting center, although you have some guys like Eugene Brooks and Josh Isosa and Garion Hatchett and Joshua Bates in that room that might be able to step up. I think a lot of people were looking at Everett as the answer there and saying, all right, well, that's one piece that we have figured out. So I look at it and I say, all right, if Oklahoma gets to conference play and Troy Everett's your starter, I feel like that's bad news because that means you didn't have somebody step up in the offseason and you've gone all out of conference play and nobody has stood out. So I was kind of trying to figure out, where does Oklahoma go next? And obviously, I think the easiest thing to say is look at the transfer portal, because if some of the other guys weren't beating out Everett, it might be a little harder. So I was looking at guys like Branson Hickman from SMU. Looked at a guy like Landon Hatchett, who's in the portal. And we all know when the portal cycle opens up, other guys are going to get in there. So kind of want to get your thoughts on what you think is next for Oklahoma on this offensive line.
Yeah, and PG, thanks for having me on. I always appreciate getting. We take a lot of swings at hooking up together on the show, and we whiff quite a bit. But man, first and foremost, when you have a Joe Moore Award year, and we saw those guys as good as they were, like. We as Oklahoma fans always get spoiled, right? If we get subpar quarterback play, I mean, look at Dylan Gabriel. We were a top offense in the country, and people still were really excited to see him bounce because we wanted better. We wanted more. We wanted Kyler. There were times that I wanted Kyler to be better. There were times that I wanted Baker to be better. So that's what we want as Oklahoma fans, right? And so that's what we want from our offensive line. Is the past couple of years we've seen some rough. This past year the recruiting grounds here in the area were not very good, so it didn't look as sexy as we initially hoped. And so people are now kind of forgetting that everybody in the country would take Bill Bedenbaugh on their staff today. Again, there are guys that are just as good as Bill Bedenbaugh, but you can count them on one hand. And so you got to trust that. I mean, if there's going to be a person that you need in that room coaching those young men, we got that guy. So you made mention of the names, and there's a lot of information going around right now that it's this stays here, and it gets wild. But I trust in Bill Bedenbaugh because I think that right now. If like Hickman is in the portal and if he shows up, I think you slide him in right now as an opportunist at that starting center job. And if you hear those words and you go, okay, so you're saying that we have nothing on campus right now, healthy, that's going to be, no, I'm not saying that, but I am saying Hickman graded out pretty well for the past couple of years. He did pretty decently. And if I remember correctly, I mean that SMU game was a pretty defensive battle, and I don't remember us just blowing up the middle, against them. So there's that. But I do think this, and I'll start with Josh Bates. Josh Bates has everything. If you ever wanted to be handed an opportunity to go from the second guy in to the man who never lets go of the position. Josh Bates has this opportunity right in front of him. So is he going to put in the work for it? Is it going to matter to him? Eichert said it on his show the other day about, a sport mattering. And if it matters, you're going to get in and you're going to, I think he was talking about Grayson Halton and his weight gain. And I think that with Bates, if this matters to you, here you go, sir. Please take it and run with it, because you have the chance of not holding on to this. You have the chance to not letting go of it. So there's Bates. We've got freshmen in Iasosa and Eugene Brooks and PG. I know that we both feel the same about Brooks. Brooks reminds me of Davin Joseph, and that's a very, very, very lofty, name to put on a young man. But he is going to be that good. And if you remember, Davin Joseph is a guy who played multiple positions. That's a Bedenbaugh type of situation we have nowadays. Is we want someone who can play multiple positions. So I think that you have to get the center, and this is my final comment on it, is the reason why we have to get the center is not necessarily just so that we know who our center is, but it's so that offensive lineman can start gelling, so that you can find your best five and have them out there. And if your best five continues to work together over the summer, going through mental reps and doing this, and we get a little healthy, we now have options. But you got to have those guys working together, because you can't not have any clue. Because if you're Fabichi Uewu and you're lining up and you're going, I have no clue who most of these people are because I've been here for a few weeks, but I also don't have any idea who's going to be on the right and who's going to be on the left at this point. And that's tough as an offensive lineman, because if you have a weakness that can be aided by your counterpart, you work together on that. If you don't know who the hell your counterpart is, there's that. Also, I know offensive linemen are smart gentlemen, but as an 18-year-old trying to learn to take this jump into college football, you got to remember the idiosyncrasies of 4 or 5 different guys. That's too much to put on your plate. So, it's about getting this line to gel, and that's why we have to find out at center.
Yeah, and I think you saw that last year. I thought the biggest problems in the run game was we were cycling out our offensive linemen and that personnel way too much. You saw Bill Bedenbaugh still tinkering with that offensive line later in the season, and I think that caused a problem for a Tawi Walker or a Javante Barnes or any of those guys, because they didn't know who was going to be blocking for them the majority of the time.
100%.
So it was hard for the running backs to develop that chemistry. So it's pretty important. And then obviously the center and the quarterback, there's a little bit of chemistry that has to, go on there with Jackson Arnold having to come under center and get that ball. So it's where Oklahoma goes from here. I think the best answer is to go to the portal and get a guy like Hickman or even Landon Hatchett, who was a guy in the offseason we talked about. This was a guy that could potentially one day end up here at Oklahoma. Well, guess what? Landon might see, hey, there's an opening now. Maybe I need to head on over here. Of course, he's got to get in the portal first for that to even be a conversation. But you've got really talented guys on campus right now. Like you said, Eugene Brooks, who I've been kind of saying, is he going to be our Caden Green of 2024? Because, I could see Bill Bedenbaugh having to slide in one of those true freshmen, and maybe that true freshman doesn't let go of that job because he just doesn't make those kind of mistakes. Caden Green was very good. And you said Eugene Brooks might not be at that level because Caden Green was a little special, but I think Eugene Brooks can come in and he can help get the job done if you absolutely need it. He's got a really good frame. He dropped a ton of bad weight. So
he did immediately.
A ton of bad weight. So Eugene Brooks, and when you watched him at the camps, he was going up against 5-star defensive linemen and wasn't losing reps. I think that's really important to kind of note. So where Oklahoma goes from the offensive line, I think it's just going to be a time will tell. But the question is, how much time does Oklahoma have? I don't think they have very much.
Yeah. And what I said to you in the green room about Caden Green, it should be mentioned so that people can really grasp onto this. Like, that's Caden Green situations happen I mean, it's a diamond in the rough. That does not happen very, very, very often, because you got to think about this as an offensive lineman in high school. That's why it's so hard to hit on some of these on offensive linemen, is because as an offensive lineman in high school, you're facing maybe one or two serviceable defensive ends a year. Like, you're not seeing, I mean, even in 6A Texas high school, you're not going to see, high end D1 talents across from you half the
You
time.
don't see a
Half
Colin
the time,
Simmons every day.
oh, yeah, you're going to see a 215 or 218-pound defensive end. And so when you get up to college and you got freaks like Danny Okoye and PJ Adebaware, like, that's a level of athlete that you line up with, and especially in the SEC, every week you are lining up a guy that gave you fits as a high school offensive lineman. So that's tough, and that's good. So sorry, my son needing a cookie, right? That's never bad, but yeah. So I mean, I think that's what you look for, is if we could get a Eugene Brooks to come in. I believe in him. I really do. I also think that if you're thinking like, man, we don't have crap for talent on campus, that is not the case. That is not the case. We still don't have EPL back in yet. And if you watched Jay and I show, and I think even Mike and Jason and I had the conversation on Mike's show, is like, EPL is a guy that you can run out as an inline tight end on like a goal line package. And he's this dude could carry the ball or he could catch a pass. He is going to be a freak of nature when he gets here. But again, he's going to have shorter amount of time because he's a two-sport athlete. So he's coming in the summer. Akinkumi, I was talking with him the other day, and this is what I like about the mentality of this team and the leadership that this crew, this staff is bringing in, is Daniel says I'm just trying to learn as much as I can and stop making simple mistakes. If I could do that, I could be running with the ones. Now, I don't want an offensive lineman on my team or an athlete on my team that doesn't have like, if I do one or two things, I'm running with the ones. I want every single person thinking that. It does not matter if it's Chapman McNown. Like, I want you to think, like, if I do a couple more things better, I could be with the ones, because that means that you're driving and you're grinding. And so Akinkumi is a guy who, he's kind of seeing all this athleticism around here that he's never seen before and trying to adapt to it, but he can match it. And so he's trying to get better. And then you talk about, guys like Logan Howland. You've seen Heath Ozeta. Heath Ozeta is the fastest rising offensive lineman on this team right now. He is absolutely balling out. And shout out to Myra. We love you, Myra. But Heath is, I'm so excited for Heath. And then Bichi Wiwu, he has just turned heads, and he is probably right now our best offensive lineman. So we've got pieces here. We are young and talented, and that's just tough because, once again, young and talented developing together. You can slide a Caden Green in with a bunch of veteran offensive line. You can't, it's not as easy to throw 3 or 4 Caden Greens in at the same time, because you saw, was it Caden Proctor at Alabama last year? That guy is an all-world #1 everything. Nobody expects him to not be a top 5 pick. And that guy had struggles quite often. So that was the best offensive lineman coming out of that class. So, and I think he will, like I said, be a top 5 pick. He could be a #1 overall OT.
Yep. Unfortunately, he had to screw Iowa over and go back to Alabama.
I think Iowa deserves it. Iowa deserves it.
Oh man, that was that whole situation's funny. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, you live under a rock, and you just need to do some research on that, because you will have a good laugh today. But no, I think Bill Bedenbaugh is probably going to earn himself a raise this year, and I would bet that if Bill Bedenbaugh puts together a very competent offensive line this year and it just looks really, really good, there's a chance somebody's going to try to get Bill Bedenbaugh to come be a OC or something like that to get him as an offensive line coach somewhere. It's bound to happen. And yeah. OU fans are about to find out real quick how good your offensive line coach is.
And PG, let me say this, because I think the ceiling is an offensive line that really is just putting everything together for the back half of the season. And that is absolutely when we need it to be going, right? And that's how Bill Bedenbaugh lines have actually, worked out. I think that in the worst case scenario, I think this offensive line has an easier time with this year's offense. If this was last year's offense, I'd be much more worried than I am, because when you run such a high amount of RPO, it's hard for veteran. I mean, you saw how many times did we see Walter Rouse getting called for a legal man downfield? That dude went to Stanford, right? He has forgotten more since he quit, since he ended the season, than I've ever learned in my life.
Yeah, he's like
But
biomechanical engineering.
oh yeah,
Like
stuff that I don't even know what that means. So I do media sales, so but for that type of situation, for this new offense, it is not going to be RPO heavy. We're getting a little back to air raid, and if you remember air raid gets the ball out pretty quick at times. And some of the scrimmage reports that we're reading here from yesterday was that Jackson Arnold was on the move quite often, and some of it planned, some of it not. But Jackson Arnold ran off a long touchdown run, and he was out, and that's where they were doing damage. So if your offensive line is going to be an issue, what can we do? You can put your quarterback on the move, and so you keep the defense trying to find out what's going on. And with the skill set that we have around him, this is good. If we didn't know what our wide receiver room looks like, or a running back room would look like, I would be worried too. But I think that we have more skill position talent right now, maybe since Kyler's year.
I think
maybe Baker's last year.
Yeah, I think the point of the conversation is we have the talent. It's all going to come together. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Whether Oklahoma hits the portal or whether they just look at the guys internally and say, this is what we're rolling with, I think it's going to be okay. Bill Bedenbaugh is going to put out an offensive line that's going to work, hopefully mesh and gel together. That really just comes down to those guys wanting to put in the work, maybe having to put in a little bit off practices to develop that chemistry. But going into the SEC, I don't think Oklahoma is in the spot that some of the media would lead you to believe that Oklahoma is in. But hey, Cooper, I appreciate you coming on and kind of talking through this offensive line. I know your kids got some distant learning today, so we'll let you get back to them. Guys, if you have not already, make sure you hit that like, you hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys next time.